is Brixton, South London, and you're watching the Jasper Drive Time.
People in the spotlight, because the time's right. Black lives matter, pump your fist for the good fight. Good people take a stand, building bridges in Islam. We chop it up and conversate, a reason this is drive time. We chop it up and conversate, a reason this is drive time.
Hi, my name's Lee Jasper. This is Brixton, South London, and you're watching the Jasper Drive Time.
People in the spotlight, because the time's right. Black lives matter, pump your fist for the good fight. Good people take a stand, building bridges in Islam. We chop it up and conversate, a reason this is drive time. We chop it up and conversate, a reason this is drive time.
Yeah, bada bing, bada boom. You're here at Lee Jasper Drive Time live on the old Ben TV channel. And as usual, listen, I've got to talk to the Mayor of London, man. I'm sitting on the tube's not moving. I don't want to sit on a static tube. Mr. Mayor, sort it out. That's why we're running late, slightly late. So if you're watching, thanks for bearing with us and patience. Not my style to be late. Anybody who knows me knows I work on Japanese business time. That's 15 minutes early for the uninitiated. You're watching Drive Time. I'm delighted just for a one-off series of shows here on Ben TV. So thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to look at 3 topics. One is the fabulous Mangrove 9. Oh my days. I went to the premiere. I saw it on TV. You know, it's like oxtail. It's better on the second and third and fourth time. We're going to be talking about the US elections and Donald Trump. My days. What a sore loser. And of course, we're going to be talking about the Black Power List 2020. All of those bright young things, Lewis Hamilton, Jackie McKenzie and others who are awarded in the top 10 most powerful black people in the United Kingdom. But first, we're going to start off with The Mangrove. Now, for those who don't know about The Mangrove 9, new film by Steve McQueen, premiered on BBC Two Sunday night. It's on iPlayer, and I'm joined today, I'm delighted to be joined by my old comrade in arms, Jeb Johnson, because I used to work at the Mangrove, chair the Mangrove Community Association for nigh on a decade, and he's going to be joining us right now to begin to look back at the Mangrove 9, but also what happened to Frank when all the dust settled, when the Mangrove 9 trial was completed. So we'll be joined by him. We'll also be joined by Jackie McKenzie of Butte McKenzie Solicitors, Windrush Solicitor Supreme. And can I just put a word out to the wise? A little bird has told me that deportations of Jamaicans is going to start back on the 2nd of December, and that they are now rounding up Jamaicans to fill that charter flight. So if you are affected by these immigration hostile environment, by the woman I call Cruella de Vil, that is Home Secretary Priti Patel, the only woman who would plug out your life support system to charge up her phone, then you need to look lively and get yourself some legal advice. So we'll be talking to Jackie McKenzie, Windrush Solicitor of the Year, and we'll be talking to Richard Sudan, a political correspondent, who's going to give us his take on the US elections and all things Biden, Harris, and Trump. Isn't it nice to see a black woman come in number 2? You know what? I'm hoping Biden sends a black woman over here to slap Boris around so she could tell him exactly what she wants him to do over Brexit. Can you imagine Boris getting beat up by Harris, a black woman? The optics are too delicious to avoid. Anyway, I'm hoping now that we can be joined by Jeb Johnson. My technical people are bringing him online so we can have that conversation. And just remember, Frank Critchlow, the founder of the Mangrove, All Saints Road, number 8 All Saints Road. Many of you will have heard and seen him. And you can email me at leejasperdrivetime@gmail.com. And the topic is Mangrove 9. So, Jeb, are you with me?
I'm with you, bro.
Oh, you're looking like purple rain out there, brother. It's all purple, but
Hey, guys, so what can I say? Like a good wine, I'm just getting better.
long time, long time. Well, look, for those who don't know, Jeb Johnson probably responsible for inflicting me on the great British public, because as a young man, I attended a meeting in Notting Hill Tabernacle Community Centre where I was recruited onto the Mangrove team way back in the 80s. And I wasn't even particularly well known at that point in my career. But as a consequence of working with Mangrove and Frank, I became the beautiful and fantastic human being that you see before you today. Somebody's got to say it, and I just did. So he's responsible, and our relationship goes back 30 odd years and still prospers today. So Jeb, talking about the Mangrove, talking about the Mangrove 9. You saw the movie, you were there before I got there, you knew all the characters in the Mangrove 9. Give us your take on Steve McQueen's effort to portray this slice of black British history.
Well, thanks, Lee. I evaluated the movie by three things. One was, did it educate, did it entertain, and did it inform? And I have to give him 3 ticks for all of them. He did all 3. By my litmus test, he's passed the test. I met Steve at the initial discussions about making the film. And I was reassured on meeting him that he would handle this project carefully and with compassion, with empathy, and with a great understanding. I was concerned about the dramatic element of it, but he convinced me at the time, don't worry, Jeb, I will handle it with care. And he has done. So I have no problems with the movie at all. In terms of...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
In terms of what it achieved, it's achieved that I'm having young people phoning me up and saying, well, Jeb, I didn't even know the Mangrove did all these things. I didn't even know about that. So in terms of informing and educating, he's done that brilliantly. The presentation of the characters, bar the dramatic element, which he has a license to do, fantastic. The storyline, fantastic. The most of the stuff that was in the courtrooms came from the transcripts of the court, so they were actually literal. And the background came from the Kensington Post and other newspapers of the time. Now, big up, Steve. You've done a fantastic job. Proud of you, my brother.
But there's still a story to tell about the Mangrove, isn't it? Well, and like you, just let me say, my phone is off the hook. I don't know if you've been on my Facebook page, but I put a tribute up there to Frank, and it's off the charts. People saying we never knew. And you know what? There's some people who lived on Westbourne Park Avenue and say, I lived there and I still didn't know. It's amazing what people don't know. But lots of people are now paying tribute to Frank and the Mangrove. But of course, with the great portrayal and so on, the story didn't end there for the Mangrove, did it? In terms of the Mangrove 9. What happened subsequently?
Far from it. Far from it, my brother. In fact, you see, what people have to... the film was about the Mangrove restaurant and the trial. What came post the trial was Mangrove Community Association, the development of a political activist wing of the organization developed from that. And this is where you came in, Brother Jasper.
That's
right. It was in that element of the organization that I recognized your ability, your skills, etc. And that was where you came into. And that organization, the Mangrove Community Organization, let me just give you a quick little things on a couple of things that we worked with. In the 80s, there was a mass uprising in Bristol. All hell had broke loose. Again, like in the Mangrove 9 trial, a number of young people were charged with rioting. Out of the blue, a guy came from Bristol and he says to Frank, our community is under attack. We need your help. Immediately, Frank mobilized us. We went down to Bristol. We did some activism. The guys had pleaded guilty to rioting. We made them change their mind. I won't tell you how we did that, but they did that. They changed their minds. And in the end, they were all acquitted. When Birmingham was under attack, you know, when the boys from the front line came, they came again. They said, Jeb, we're out of our depths here. We don't know what the hell's going on. Again, Mangrove, you know, the 5th emergency service, or the only black emergency service, bang on in there. And then when I joined with you, Lee, with the National Black Caucus, we were taking that message and taking the model all over the country.
That's right. That's right. A fantastic history, and you know what? I think we're going to have a Mangrove special. I don't think we can do it justice in the time that we've got allocated here today. So I'm going to invite everybody back for our Mangrove special. You more get Mashup and other characters that were around at the time to come and give us a thing. Now, at that time, we discovered, didn't we, when they arrested Frank again for I don't know how many times, but he was on bail constantly for a decade. That's how many trumped up charges Frank Critchlow faced. And when we were there, of course, we discovered there was a corporate conspiracy against Mangrove Community Association because we had, and I don't know if we can put that letter online, but we had an application to build an ex-offenders hostel in the area, and the local Superintendent Clyde Pearman, who was PC Pulley on steroids, decided he was going to stop that and shut us down. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Lee, if you remember, what happened was after they nicked Frank again for the umpteenth time, I wrote a letter to Pearman telling him all the wonderful things we were doing. We're building the ex-offenders home. We're building the Abbeyfield Mangrove Society. We were doing the video project. We were telling the man we were doing everything that we can to support the community, not knowing that on receipt of that letter, he wrote to the so-called corporate body. I didn't even know the corporate body existed. And that was at the time Notting Hill Housing Trust, Kensington Trust. He even wrote to the Home Office. And basically, you know, I don't know if you got extracts of the letter, but basically he was saying we were extremists, we mustn't be funded, we were this, we were that, he should have got rid of me. But the essence of this communication was the response from Nicholas Freeman, who was then the leader of Kensington and Chelsea, and he told him straight, he said, listen, this is none of your business, you're a cop. You're supposed to be doing copying business, not getting involved in the actions and the responsibilities of democratically elected people. The same thing. But the interesting thing, if you remember, Lee, was we heard about this letter, but we didn't have it.
Aye.
So we had to do a Watergate type exercise. Get it?
You know what? People just don't realise that what we had to get up to. Mangrove had its literally secret service, and the information the reason why we were able to spring Frank from those very serious charges of possessing heroin and cocaine, and it was all 100% pure, by the way, so it came straight from the police labs. But the reason we were able to get him off those charges is because the Secret Service, whether it was in the Home Office, whether it was, and I'll mention his name, Trevor Hall, because we love him dearly.
Yes, rest in peace, Trevor.
Trevor Hall brought down the permanent secretary, the head of the civil service, to come and see Jeb, me and Frank on All Saints Road, such is the noise that we made. And we got the letter that Superintendent Clyde Pearman wrote to all the funding agencies, accusing us of being a criminal conspiracy, drug dealers, and how they were not to fund us. And the council, the chair of the council, leader of the council, Kensington and Cherry, Nicholas Freeman, said to him, your job is to mind the Queen's peace and not to interfere in the democratic process. Oh my days, it was a scandal. And that's what we called the corporate conspiracy to close down Mangrove. And can I say they weren't successful? Because we got the funding for the ex-offenders hostel. It was called Mangrove First Base, and it was for black women who were coming out of jail, who needed somewhere to live, and we gave them employment support and counselling and development at the same time. And so Mangrove's history went from there to there. But Frank, when he was arrested on the latest charge in 1988 and he went to prison, they refused him bail. When he came out, he was never the same man. At that age, he was 60 odd. He wasn't really recovering well from his period in prison. And then, of course, we had to close down the restaurant because even though we got £50,000 compensation, which is the largest civil award payout of any police incident at the time, it wasn't enough to save the restaurant. And so he eventually closed that down. And it's a sad day. We may launch a crowd fundraiser to buy that restaurant back. We're just waiting for the COVID recession to kick in, so the property price drops, and then we may ask you to put your hand in your pocket to help buy back the restaurant and reopen it in Frank's name. But Jeb, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you. We're going to do this mangrove special.
My pleasure, bro.
We're going to do this mangrove
My
special.
pleasure.
We want you, we want Scotty, we're going to do the full thing, and we're going to bring people up to speed. There is a Mangrove Part 2 film that is in there for any budding filmmaker or people who want to bring the story up to date from where Steve McQueen left it off. But for now, Jeb Johnson from the Mangrove. Thank you,
Bye,
sir.
my brother.
We speak
Thank
soon.
you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it, straight from the horse's mouth, man. I mean, people just don't know. You can go on my Facebook, Lee Meter, that's M-E-T-A, Jasper, and you can read all about Frank Critchlow there. Can I just say, he was the most ethical, responsible, committed individual I ever met as a young man. I came to the Mangrove at 20-odd, and the next thing you know, I find myself in the presence of this giant of a man. He paid for people's christenings, funerals, paid for their children to go to college and university. He mediated disputes. I remember somebody getting robbed on All Saints Road. And it was Jeb, actually, who put the word out that this individual, whoever robbed them, had to bring back the stuff immediately. And I'd only been there a couple of months. You know, that stuff had been returned. The purse, the bag, everything was intact, had returned to the Mangrove within 2 hours of putting out that call. When the woman came to get her bag back, she couldn't believe it. That was the authority, the power, the majesty that Frank Critchlow brought together in the Mangrove Community Association. And I was just delighted to be there. That's where I got my PhD in politics. You should call me Dr. Lee Jasper, because Frank Critchlow, as you can see them there on screen, a man from Trinidad. He fought Mangrove 9. He was, then there was the Mangrove 6. A few years later, then there was another Mangrove 11 where they were all planted with cocaine and heroin. He fought the Black Watch Committee, which was a group of PCs that planted drugs on people in the All Saints Road. There you see the Mangrove 9. There's 8 of them there because Roden Gordon's not on there. That's a long story, and we're not going to delve into it now. Although I will say, Steve McQueen, I thought you dealt with Roden unsympathetically. You know, I thought he could have had a better portrayal of Roden Gordon online. I just got to say that right up the front. Because whatever the arguments and the issues, he had an organisation, he was there for a number of years, he made his contribution. And I thought you sort of treated him in a comedic way when he should have had a more serious issue. After all, when you think about the pressure that people were under at the time, is it any wonder some of them were stressed and weren't acting in the emotion of it in the right ways. Even Frank was stressed at the time. So that's enough about the Mangrove. I'm looking for some indication that my next guest is online. Let me just check the time. 29 should be. I think so. Can I have an indication? Are we good to go? Well, look, if not, then I just want to say, just what is happening with Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings? Cummings is going. Cummings is going. You like that? Listen, you only get these jokes here on Lee Jasper Drive Time. But listen, it's amazing to see what happened there. I don't know if you read the Financial Times. Look, I read the Financial Times every day because when you're operating at the top level of government and you need to be fundamentally briefed about what's happening, you need to have the top class information. So the Financial Times wrote an article giving us the inside explanation of the dynamics around Dominic Cummings going. You know, the guy that decided to drive to Barnard Castle up in West Yorkshire from London during the first lockdown. So what Boris is telling everybody is to stand at your yard, stay at home in translation. But Dominic Cummings was driving up the M1 with his wife and kids and family, and then when caught out, he said, "Oh, I was going for some eye test." You went to West Yorkshire to a castle for an eye test. Must think we're all stupid. That boy began to lose credibility, as did Boris from that point on. And Boris defended him. And then, of course, we now know that Boris has got rid of him. And why? Well, you know, who knows the dynamics? Financial Times says that the Brexit element of Boris Johnson's team, the We Want a Hard Brexit posse, as it were just becoming unbearable. And he destroyed relationships with the civil service. Boris Johnson's partner, Carrie, apparently didn't like him, and he was Boris was on, didn't like him, and Carrie decided in the end that when Dominic Cummings' second in command, and that was Lee, something or other, I can't remember, Lee Khan or Kant, or can't anybody remember, decided to go for the senior press officer role in number 10 Downing Street. Carrie said, no, them people there have not handled the COVID crisis well, nothing is happening, and you're getting hammered in the press, and it's because their poor media management skills, why you're getting such a hard time. And she objected, and she said, you need a professional in that post. And Dominic Cummings says, if I can't have my guy in that post, then you better give him another job. Boris actually offered him, said, you can't have the press officer's post, but you can have the chief of staff. Come and be my chief of staff. And guess what? When Boris got home for his dinner that night, Carrie said, are you mad? You just put him out the frying pan into the fire. No, we can't have. He's not doing the press officer's post, and he can't have the chief of staff's post because they're all incompetent. So he was squeezed out of that, and then they started to brief, didn't they? We saw all the briefings coming out in the press trying to characterise Carrie. I must say that the way that Carrie was treated was abominable. I mean, they were calling her Princess Not-Nots and all. I mean, the atmosphere in 10 Downing Street for women is just appalling. And she's not the only one, because Allegra Stratton, who got the post of senior press officer, was in tears because they were briefing Lee and Dominic, the two guys I'm talking about in the Brexit, in the Prime Minister's team, were slaughtering Carrie and Allegra in the press. So really is a hostile environment for women at number 10 Downing Street. And that's been the saga. But what I'm looking forward to is Camilla Harris coming over to the United Kingdom and dealing with Boris on the issue of Brexit, telling him, listen, you better get in line on the Northern Ireland situation because Biden is heavily steeped in Irish ancestry. Can you imagine the dynamics of a black woman? And can you imagine Boris sitting down, being ordered about by Vice President Harris? Oh, it's too delicious. Anyway, we're now joined online by Jackie Mackenzie. So if we can bring her online, delighted that she could join us. She's hot off the red carpet, having been feted as one of the top 10 most influential people on the Black Power list. I'm delighted. I've been working with her and got to know over the last year a more conscientious, hard-working solicitor you won't find, done enormous amounts of work on the supporting the Windrush victims. Jackie, I can see you've still got the glitter in your hair.
That's grey. It's grey. It's actually the greys.
Oh, right. Okay.
No glitter.
Now, look, you're a hard-working solicitor. Tell the viewers a little bit about you. How long have you been soliciting? Maybe that's the wrong word. How long have you been?
I haven't been soliciting, honestly.
How long have you been a solicitor?
I've worked in a quasi-legal role possibly for about 3 decades, but I've only really actually been admitted as a solicitor since 2008 when I joined Bernberg Pearson Solicitors. That was after 20 years of a previous career in local government.
20 years. So
yes.
So you've been doing that for 20 years, and you started where? You started at Bernberg's, didn't you?
I started at Bernberg Pearson Partners, yes, working with Gareth Pearce and people, Marcia Willis-Stewart, yes, that was my first foray, I retrained. I was a director at Hackney and Hackney Council, and retrained. I had a law degree. You know, when you leave school, your parents always think, you know, do law, medicine, or something like that. So I had a law degree, but I never used it. And in 2006, I decided I ought to do something. And so I did a 2-year training stint with Bernberg Pierce and qualified in 2008. Stayed there for a few years before setting up my own firm.
Beautiful. And you're from Grenada, aren't you right?
Yeah, my mother is, and my father is from Jamaica.
Okay.
I have I suppose, a closer affinity to Grenada because we went to live there when I was 13, and I stayed there until I was 19. So my formative years were in Grenada.
Revolutionary politics from Grenada.
Yeah.
When we were growing up,
absolutely.
when we were
Yes.
growing up, we used to refer to the Grenadian mafia, because they were a group of people at the top of British politics in the 80s and so on. They used to run everything. And we used to refer to them quite lovingly, actually, as the Grenadian mafia, because they were always at the top of their tree. But a great history from Grenada, just like Trinidad, as we spoke earlier about mangrove, and it was Bernbergs who represented Frank Critchlow with Mike Mansfield and Gareth Pearce and others early on. But a great tradition out of Grenada of people into law, politics, and political activism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, look, we're delighted to that. Now, you are in the elite of the elite, because you were nominated, were you not, for, well, tell us, the Black Power List 2020. You were in the top 10 with people like Lester Hamilton, with Stormzy, with Professor Ken from the public health field. I mean, a literal galaxy of stars. And you were recognised at a ceremony yesterday evening.
Yes, well, that's right. Well, some people are a little bit confused about it because the powerful media run something called the Power List for Black Excellence, and so I'm in there's 100 names for 2021. So I'm listed in the 100 names for 2021, and I'm number 7 on that list apparently. And that was announced yesterday. But there was also their awards. And I got their inaugural humanitarian award for my work on Windrush. So it was 2 different things happening yesterday.
You must be enormously proud. I know that you're building an extension in your house to house your awards, because I know you have so many this year, and quite rightly so.
I got the legacy one that I got presented from you. Do you remember?
I do. The obelisk. I haven't got one. Can you believe that, Jackie? It's just really not fair.
I'm very, very proud of this because it's come from my peers. So, there's awards. I've got a whole load of them, actually. I'm very proud of this one.
We gave it with great love and affection. Now, you've been working on the Windrush things for the longest time. Just give us an update. Where are we on the Windrush debacle? Because I think people are losing the will to live, not least the victims themselves. Sadly, many of who've now passed before receiving compensation. We were promised apology, we were promised restitution and justice, the Wendy Williams review, and so on. Where are we today with that?
Well, I mean, when 12,000 people have actually gone through the scheme and got status documents. So, it's probably wrong to say there's been absolutely no progress.
Okay, 12,000, that's a lot.
Yeah, and that's a lot. Those are people who've got status documents. Because remember, when we first started working on Windrush after the scandal, remember, it's been going on for decades.
Yeah.
But when the scandal came to public prominence, the first issue was that people didn't have status documents, immigration papers, as they call it. It's in the vernacular. And so, 12,500, I understand, people have gone through the system and have gotten their papers. However, the Home Office themselves and our own data that we've collected in from the various high commissions as to how many of their nationals are undocumented suggests that there's possibly about 50,000 people without any papers. So the numbers are very small in that respect. And we think a lot of it is to do with, and it will be, 5% out anyway, people die or migrate and so on. But we think that people are still very frightened because the language that you hear coming from the Home Secretary and from the Home Office and from the government is still very hostile. We see deport charter flights, we see this hostile language towards lawyers. hostile language towards people seeking refuge coming across in the small boats, the putting up of Home Office fees that nobody can ever really access it and therefore can't access justice or their rights. And so, the climate's hostile. I mean, they've changed the word hostile environment to whatever it is, compliance environment, but it's not. And so I think a lot of people are very frightened to come around or to get involved in this. I've gone out to centres of influence, churches and even places like, jerk chicken shops and betting shops. And I know it's a very cliched way of looking at it, but I've gone out to places where I know a lot of our people who haven't yet come forward would be. And they tell you that they're very frightened. We've managed to coax a few people out, but I think the Home Office aren't being cooperative in their approach, and that's why the numbers are so few. There are also academics and researchers who actually think that figure is still very small. It could be up to, 250,000 people, particularly people in Africa and Asia who haven't even heard about the Windrush scandal and who were wrongly removed or wrongly kept out.
Wow.
And particularly so if you start factoring in third and fourth generations. So, this number could be anything. We don't know. So the 12,000 on the one hand, we say, well, that's 12,000 people who find themselves in a better place, but it's still a minuscule number of what we think the real issue is. Then there's the compensation scheme, which has been abysmal. It's a scheme that doesn't work. People keep going on about the low numbers. The low numbers is a bit of a red herring. The numbers are low and they will remain low because most people don't actually qualify under it. That generation who came here, because of the racism that they encountered, they either bought houses or they got secure council tenancy. So they didn't lose their house. They weren't going off to university, so they didn't lose out on those opportunities. They'd been with their GPs so long, GPs didn't think to ask them to come in and bring a passport. And few of them, when they lost jobs, were resourceful and found ways of working in other ways. So the heads of claim aren't appropriate. What we should have had was a proper redress scheme which actually recognises that a wrong has been done to people and pay them. And then you have people on top of that who may have lost a job or who may have lost a house. There are some, but they're small, and they should then be compensated as well as. So there should be two different things happening, and they're not. And there are issues around evidence and issues around, whether they're going to fund people who've got or compensate people who've got criminal convictions and the very, very low tariff. It's an appalling scheme in many ways, and it's got to be sorted out. So in many ways, we're not really very, very far into dealing with it. 3 years on, it's actually, I know the major scandal hit the news in April 2018, but the very first case hit the newspapers was November. So we're 3 years on.
3 years on, and we're not getting very far. It doesn't seem to me that in relation to compensation in particularly, and the numbers are even in relation to people who've got their papers, are not where they need to be, and that's absolutely right. Our view is that, and when I say BME Lawyers for Justice, of which Jackie and I are part, our view is the government should just segue off £200 million, give that to an independent charity or established panel, and let them administer the compensation, not on the threshold of beyond reasonable doubt, i.e. I have to prove every expense for every day of the last 30 years beyond reasonable doubt. Who keeps receipts for the rest of their lives for every aspect of your expenditure? But on the balance of probabilities, that where you have enough evidence and there are sufficient records in general terms, and it is plausible and reasonable, and the cost of it, then an independent body could allocate that money. Because I'm afraid that lots more people will pass away of this Windrush generation not being given access to justice. And the form itself is Byzantine. How many pages is that form? Isn't it 48 or?
No, the form itself isn't the problem. The form is only 18 pages, and a lot of it is not applicable to most people anyway.
Okay.
So it's not the form, it's the guidance notes that's the problem. The guidance notes is 46 pages
46
long.
pages of guidance.
And even lawyers, and nobody knows what half of it means. Lawyers are struggling with it. But it's the system, it's the way the system operates, but also, more importantly, the way the Home Office are dealing with people. So, for instance, we tested the waters by putting in our first two, which were very detailed. We had very detailed witness statements from the clients about the impact on their lives. Two cases where there's because sometimes you get cases and you're not 100% sure whether someone's got a claim or not. But these are without a doubt, this woman had applied for all these jobs and she still kept the letters that said, no, you can't have this. We want to give you the job, but we can't because we don't understand your status and so on. And in one case, the Home Office has written back with 30 bullet points of questions. And I would say Of those 30 bullet points, and it took almost a year to do that, of those 30 bullet points, I'd say about 27 of them are actually answered in the representations. Now, we're lawyers and we're getting that, and we have to deal with that frustration, but we just answered, see section here, see this piece of evidence. But imagine a client working on their own, which most of them are, getting a letter like that. They just tear it up, put it in the bin and say, we're not bothering.
And why wouldn't they? Because, my view is it's deliberately designed to be a bureaucratic tripwire. And the culture in the Home Office is refuse, question, in the hope that they either exhaust the clients or they run out of patience or the lawyers run out of funding. Either way, it's deeply and wholly unsatisfactory. Well, Jackie McKenzie, it's been a delight to have you with us. Congratulations on your award. You're ending the year in fine style. I'm sure we'll have you back on again, and we may do a programme on immigration legislation and what people need to know, and it'd be useful to have you join us at that stage. But for now, Jackie McKenzie, top 10 Black Power list in the United Kingdom. Thank you. Speak soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Well, you heard it here first. If you've got a record button on your thing, press record now. I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. Are you doing it? 1. Okay. Recording. Hopefully. The government, we hear, is about to launch a charter flight to return people back to Jamaica on the 2nd of December. If you are reporting to a police station, contact your lawyer now, because every deportation flight that has ever been, there has been people on that plane that people like Jackie and myself and Zita Holborn from Black Activists Rising Against the Cuts have pulled off the plane, literally through judicial intervention, because they were wrongly identified for deportation. These charter flights spread panic in our community, and this is a public warning, a public health alert. The government is doing a charter flight on the 2nd of December. Seek legal advice immediately if you're signing on at a police station, and make sure you get your papers in order pretty damn quick. Okay, we're going to move on, the last segment of the show, and I'm delighted that you've stuck with us. So I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I'm having a great time. There's nothing like Lee Jasper in glorious Technicolor, 4K, and so on and so forth. And we're going to be joined now by Richard Sudan. He's my political correspondent on the Lee Jasper Drive Time. He's a young man, a journalist extraordinaire, and he's covered news items for channels right across the political spectrum, and worked for many stations online. So I'm delighted to have him with us now. We're going to be talking about Donald J. Trump. The man's lost the election by a country mile. His legal cases are collapsing. But you know who we've got to thank for that? I'm going to tell you who we've got to thank for defeating Donald Trump. Be controversial, because some may not agree with it. Black Lives Matter. That's who you've got to thank for defeating Donald Trump, because Black Lives Matter posed a challenge to the racism and white supremacy of the 45th President of the United States, and made sure that he didn't cross the finish line in this election. Richard, are you with us?
I'm here, Lee. How are you doing, Lee? Always good to see you.
I'm good. Well, look, these are unique, historic, and unprecedented times. Give us your take on the US elections.
Wow, I mean, you summed up a lot of it. I mean, of course, the election itself was really characterized by the usual kind of racist track record sound bites from Donald Trump. And as you correctly said, once again, the black vote has basically saved, at the penultimate last hour, Joe Biden, who's now the president-elect. I mean, so much to say, really, Lee. I mean, of course, you know, over the summer, and not just the summer, for many years, we've seen continued deaths at the hands of the state, and also, you know, white militia groups, which many are saying are actually working at times, working with the state. What I thought was interesting, you know, was the speech given by Joe Biden and, of course, Kamala Harris. Now,
on the one hand, you know, there are many people, myself included, it's absolutely understandable. We're happy and delighted to see the back of Donald Trump and all that he represents. And let's, of course, not forget Donald Trump, you know, the neo-fascist son of a Klansman that he is of course a symptom of a much deeper and wider condition in the US. I think the task now is for Americans, Black Americans, anyone who's serious about anti-racism, to really hold Joe Biden's political feet to the fire now, and also Kamala Harris, and ensure that they set about a radical agenda of restorative justice for Black Americans, because, you know, the status quo in America is continuingly, and I just want to mention, a few days ago, we saw the death of Sincere Pierce and Anthony Crooms in the US, two Black teenagers, kids, who were shot by a police officer in Orlando. And of course, the officer now has been put on paid administrative leave. The officer hasn't even been named. I don't believe the parents were even actually contacted as of yet by the police in Orlando to even speak to them, much less offer an explanation or apology. So that's the reality facing Black Americans. And of course, you know, it's understandable that the symbology, if you like, of Kamala Harris in particular being the vice president is exciting people. But of course, we remember all too well in 2008 how excited many people were about Obama becoming president. And I think there's a very legitimate, loud argument now from Black Americans who are saying we want specific, tangible action taken to ensure that, you know, not just that police deaths end and that there's accountability, a legal process which sees officers charged and jailed, but also restorative justice in the form of, you know, reparations, economic justice in the form of, for example, Black businesses being given loans to be able to function.
I have to say though, Richard,
education too.
I have to say though, Richard, that if you look at Biden's Build Back Better race equity plan, I've never really seen anything like it. I don't know whether he'll deliver it. That is entirely another question. It was his manifesto commitment. But if you look at the economic section, it's less strong on the criminal justice, sadly. But Black Lives Matter has to be a permanent revolution and keep the pressure on them to do that. But if you look in the economic section on reparations and investment in Black economy along the heading of Black equity, there's a lot to be admired in that plan. It's when I read it, I thought to myself, it's typical. A liberal white man will always get away with pushing more radical race equality objectives than a black man ever will, because it's just always contextualized as extremism. So I have to give them credit on that. Let's hope that they pull through. But on the issue of, and just let me, you also wrote and highlighted, I've been seeking to highlight, haven't you, a number of suspected lynchings that have taken place all across America during this period. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, there are so many. I urge people to go online and just literally Google Black lynchings in the US 2020. And we've literally seen about a dozen over the summer. Now, what we've seen is these lynchings of predominantly Black men. Basically, what's happened is Black men have been found literally hanging from ropes, sometimes in trees. There was one Black man who was found strung up and hung from a basketball rim on a basketball court. And what's really alarming people is that in each and every instance, these are being ruled as suicides again and again and again. And basically, Black Americans are rallying and they're saying there's no way these are suicides. And they're basically pointing again, I mentioned it before, to the potentiality of the corroboration between white supremacists who are literally, you know, swiping Black men from their porches, looking for soft targets. And it's not a coincidence that these Black men, in my opinion, are being found hung from ropes. This is a deliberate piece of kind of
racial
murderous,
terrorism.
malign.
Racial terrorism. Well, Richard, look, I'm sorry, we've got to cut it short, I'm afraid. We're going to have you on again. Thanks so much for reporting on the front line. We want to hear more about that story and, of course, the US elections. Well, as we come to the end of this show, hope you've liked it and give us some support. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Just look up Lee Jasper. You'll find us all of the above. Can't even get my words out. But